Rose?
Roll call for the City Council meeting of Wednesday, November 1st, 2017 at 9 a.m. Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mursky, Mr. Winarski. Mr. Witherspoon is on his way. Please rise for a moment of silent meditation and pledge of allegiance.
This morning, I'd ask that we remember all of those in our community that are less fortunate than we are in any and every way, both locally and globally, and everything in between. Ask that we remember those who have lost loved ones since the last time we were in these chambers, and honor those families. And finally, we ask our God and Creator to give us the proper information, the best information, and then the wisdom to know how to apply it to make the best decisions for the citizens of the city of Erie. Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of minutes from the meeting of October 18th, 2017, and bills for payment on October 27th and November 3rd, 2017. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mursky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Kwiatkowski. I don't think there's anybody here, but for repository sales, but
Okay, I can bring it up. Are there any citizens here for a repository sale? Are there any citizens here for a repository sale? One last time. Are there any citizens here for a repository sale? Hearing none, Rosa, we move on to...
We don't have anybody signed up for citizens to be heard, so they can take
and just a reminder to the public that after a citizen is to be heard, you may be asked to be cut off during your process or finish up quick. We have a public hearing at 9:30. If there are any more people that want to speak after that, we will resume citizens to be heard. But we will be terminating at 9:30 to adjourn the public hearing. To bring the public hearing on. Okay. Nobody called in, Rose?
No.
Okay. We'll open it up now to citizens be heard. Please remember you have 5 minutes to give your name and address.
Good morning, Honorable Council members. Art Leopold, 5341 Apple Grove Lane, Erie. I speak to you today on a familiar topic, my advocacy for the decriminalization of marijuana. This last Thursday, we had a energetic, robust discussion up at the Jefferson Society with three knowledgeable members of our citizenry and Representative Ed Gainey that come up from Pittsburgh to talk to us about the decriminalization issue. I think it was informative, it was lively, and obviously in support of that action. I've also sent to every one of you the ACLU report that highlights information regarding Pennsylvania and that effort. Since that time, they've come out with another small addendum indicating there are 50,000 people in the state correctional institutions, 360,000 involved in incarceration in county jails, probation, parole. Pennsylvania has the highest incarceration rate in the Northeast and the fourth highest in the country. 7 in 10 new commitments are for non-violent offenses, basically drug offenses. So this is something that we can solve. I understand the council is strongly considering a move, and certainly I would appreciate your considered effort and focus on this matter. Also, I rise in support of the community benefit agreements. This is something that would be pertinent to the public hearing that's coming up. Community benefit agreements are those agreements that are put together between community organizations, governmental entities, and a developer. And just to give you an idea, this is not new. Way back when the city entered into a discussion about bringing cable into the city, it talked with a cable provider, and it extracted some dollars that came into the city as a fee, and also the establishment of something called community access TV. So this is not a new idea. This is an idea that in other cities has been done to promote local hiring, affordable housing, living wages, training, help from minority and women-owned businesses. So I would strongly consider, and I've heard rumor, that you're going to entertain a discussion about community benefit agreements in a public hearing environment. I would strongly have you put that on your radar. It's wonderful that we are having development in the city. I think we all applaud that. But we can point to numerous efforts out there where hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent in one area and it leaves the community behind. We don't want to do that. We want to be able to take some small percentage, some concession regarding local hiring, minority hiring, and bring it in so it benefits the whole community. And there's a number of those efforts. The other thing I want to talk about is the effort to repurpose the McBride Viaduct Bridge. Safety. 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 That's what it's all about, gentlemen. It's about safety. We want to keep citizens, kids going to school safe. That doesn't seem unreasonable to me, and I don't understand why there's a big rush to move on something, to spend $7 million, $8 million, 5% of that coming from the city. Slow down. There are compromise positions that could be had to keep the citizens safe. You have the charge to do that. It's your responsibility. Don't rush into this. God forbid that we spend $8 million and something happens over in that corner. The reason that viaduct was put up originally was for safety. Something happened over there. And so I think we ought to just consider what's being said. There's a nonprofit group that's willing to step up and to help out with that bridge. There are other ideas floating around, maybe even like putting a pedestrian bridge across there. If we can't save, if you really want to spend the money and you really want to tear that thing down, put something up in its place for safety. Those are my considerations today. I thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Groskevich. I live at 4736 Old French Road. I lived at 23rd East Avenue back in the 80s, and I walked the bridge many times. It was actually safer than Parade Street. I worked at Hammett Emergency Room, and so we have a couple songs to sing for you, or at least one.
Excuse me, there's no props in City Hall. That's by rule.
Okay.
No demonstrations. Just, you address council.
Okay.
Can we sing without the guitar?
Pardon?
We sing without the guitar.
No singing. That's just the rules of council that were passed a while back.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And a couple more minutes about the bridge itself. That was the first time I walked it last week, and it's been decades since I walked it. It was quite a heartfelt moment. I felt that as a walkway, anywhere from Europe, or I was in Florida last year, things like this are being saved in other cities, and I feel that, this bridge is your bridge, this bridge is our bridge, from 12th and East Ave along the Bayfront Highway, high above the city, all over the east side. This bridge was built for you and me. Thank you very much, sir.
Adam Trott, 531 West 6th Street, second floor. Thank you for a few minutes this morning in the caucus. And I apologize for my passionate remark regarding the danger of the 12th and East Bayfront intersection. You mentioned that it's all about the numbers and safety. Well, as I said in the caucus, the study by L.R. Kimball identified the 12th and Bayfront intersection as a dangerous intersection to be avoided. That's why they proposed the crazy notion of a sidewalk along the south side of 12th Street to join from the Bayfront to East Ave, so the people you're forcing that direction would avoid that dangerous intersection. We had a meeting on site and walked it with PennDOT and city engineer and showed them it's impossible to do that. They acknowledged that, and now their plan is to enhance the north side sidewalk, which in itself is not an easy project. So they're resigning themselves that what they claimed in the study to be a dangerous intersection to stay away from, they are now including in the plan to remove the viaduct. To me, that is what Jim Carroll was quoted in a paper the other day as saying, if new information comes out, it warrants a public hearing. PennDOT gets it, that if there's something significantly wrong with the project, there should be a public hearing. You talk about safety. The people are walking alongside a highway. There's so much documentation about the problem with forcing them alongside the Bayfront connector between the noise, pollution, bad weather. When there's snow, that thing gets plowed under. City is not very responsive in clearing it. You're telling people that's the only way they're going to have to cross over the tracks for 1.5 miles. That's their only option if they don't have a car. That's a deal breaker. The next deal breaker, when you say money, well, we already know, it's been established, $1.2 million is a floating amount of money. It can go to repair, it can go to demolition, wherever it's needed best. But right now, you've got a story that has significantly changed, that has never had a public hearing. It was presented as 1.2 million demo, 7.2 or more to fix. Today we stand here. It's a 3.1 million demolition project, and that is after they've cut $2 million out of the budget. Because it's been established by public record, their proposal is a $4.5 million budget project. They've scaled it back to 2.4 because that's all they have. And they're not telling us what aren't they doing that they were supposed to be doing for the 4.5 million. We've done our estimates. We're at about 3 million. We've had some consultation with Swank Company down in Pittsburgh that does this work. They're highly respected. And we came up with 3 million. Whether 3 million's completely 100% on, I can't say. But I can say we're in the ballpark with that. So now we've gone from 1.2 versus 7.2 to 3 and 3. That deserves a public hearing. I think you're holding our advocacy group to a different standard than you're holding the project team. Every time we've come up and said something, we've provided documentation. Oftentimes it's public record from the own project team's issuance. But when they tell you something that's different from what we're saying, you never say, oh, really? Show me. You've never done that with them. And when we've asked you about that problem, you said, well, if it's your word against theirs, we got to take theirs. Just ask them, show me. They say there's a $5 to $6 million budget to fix the bridge. Say, show me. I'm telling you, I asked them and they said they don't have it. So we're asking that you need to do that. You need to hold them to the same standard you're holding us. And you need to also understand, for us to get money, we need the city's support. We can't get all kinds of grants and funding to repair that bridge without the city supporting us. So as long as the mayor wants that bridge demolished, we can't get any money. That's why we need a public hearing. We need to address these issues head on. So since we can't get a public hearing through city council's purview, we're filing an injunction. The attorney has cleared the way for me to announce that we are filing an injunction on this project to delay it and get a public hearing. So I hope you understand the effort it takes to do this. And one last item. When you're criticizing the residents in that area for not coming here and speaking up, you need to look at your own position. And how do you expect someone who barely pays their bills every month, many of them collect scrap metal and go to Liberty Iron and Metal every weekend so they can buy groceries. You're asking them to come here and try to change this project when you guys are sitting there with the power of your vote and you're not doing it. Please understand the difference in that and why those people are disenfranchised. They're looking at you guys, and you guys aren't even doing anything about it. So, thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Erie City Council. My name is Jason C. Brundle. I'm at 4131 McClellan Avenue in our hometown, Erie, PA. First and foremost, I'd like to thank those that are not going to be on City Council. You guys that are not going to be on City Council during the next administration, thank you. Thank you for your service as a fighter, as an advocate, and a community leader for the city of Erie and her citizens. Thank you, and I applaud you, and I was so happy and so amazed on how we work together to keep moving Erie forward from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Now, the reason why I'm here. Now, the one thing is that Erie and her citizens, we love and we accept everybody. Thank you for being an ally with the LGBT community. I came out in 2000. When I came out in 2000, there was that Cappuccinos on North Park Row. Jesse and Ricardo, those two amazing, the amazing couple on the bike, they told me, Jason, it's going to be okay. They understood me, they saw me, and they saw me as a bright light, a shining person, and they said it's going to be okay in Erie. That was in 2000 when I met them. Today, I'm an Erie ambassador with the Regional Chamber of Commerce. I'm a young Erie professional, and also I'm an LGBT advocate. I'm a spokesleader for Equality Pennsylvania, the only one in Erie region. Not anybody from Greater Erie Alliance for Equality, not anybody from Northwest Pride Alliance. Also, I am part of the caucus with the Pennsylvania Democrat Party that meets every state committee meeting across the Commonwealth. Whenever I went to Allentown 2 years ago, the caucus leader, Adrian Schreiker, told me, keep being that voice we need up in Northwest Pennsylvania. Now, before Greater Erie Alliance for Equality with Will Kohler and Rich McCarty, and Mike Mulliner and Alex Fearon from Northwest Pride Alliance began their fight, I was fighting too with them. And because of recent discoveries and recent campaigns, which was mine, there was that negativity. There was that negative reinforcement. There was that negative perception about me and as a fighter, just like you for her citizens, the city of Erie. Now, there was a failed leadership with the Greater Erie Alliance for Equality and Northwest Pride and the Senate administration. When I'm talking about the Senate administration is I've came here numerous times to ask during Pride Month in June when we have Pride Parade to raise our banner, the Gilbert Baker flag in City Hall, and no one allowed me as an LGBT citizen to wave my banner proud. Yet, Joe Senate, our current mayor, allowed Gannon to wave the Model UN flag. Let's be fair and let's be honest. If you're going to wave the Model UN flag and other flags for other minority groups, you have to play fair and you have to be transparent. And then also there was, with the Senate administration, there were mayors across the Commonwealth, across the nation, who signed up as an ally for the LGBT community. Senate never did that. And I hope the new mayor will do that too. Now, the reason why I'm here is for the Human Rights Campaign Municipal Equality Index. Right off, hot off the press, it was released 2 months ago. Erie failed again. And it's the lack of leadership in the LGBT community that I'm trying to work with diplomacy, tact, and humility, that they're not allowing me or being welcomed in or accepting for me to work together, just like council does when they work together for the citizens of Erie. What the Human Rights Municipal Equality Index is the relationship with not just city leaders or civic leaders in Erie County and the city of Erie. It's the relationship. It's about policies, about laws. It's about, yes, we do have the Human Rights Commission, but it only goes so far. And so that's the reason why I'm here. Allentown, the same size as Erie, in 2014, 2016, 2017, all was in the 90s or 100. That is A-plus work. Erie, the first one, 57. Last year, 39. This year, 37. We are the lowest in the Commonwealth, and I am here to say thank you and to pass this packet to you to lean forward, to work with the next administration and the next City Council. I'd like to pass these packets to you.
My name is Freda Teffer. I live at 1738 West 23rd Street in Erie. I'm a certified orientation and mobility specialist. First of all, I want to take a few moments to call to your attention the condition of the sidewalk on French Street between 6th and 7th, and 7th between French and Holland, and the sidewalk on the north side of 7th Street between State and French. Those treatments of the sidewalk during construction do not conform to ADA standards. They don't conform to the MUTCD and the other standards that the city is responsible for complying with in order to provide adequate notification and accommodation for all pedestrians during construction. I have repeatedly sent information to people in engineering and code enforcement and Mr. Witherspoon about these standards and best management practices, and I hope that a lawsuit, not anything I would have anything to do with, but I hope neither a lawsuit nor a fatality or an injury of a person with a visual impairment occurs before the city wakes up to their responsibility to address these issues. I also want to speak about the viaduct. I attended the plans review, which was engineered to not allow for public discussion other than one-to-one with individuals. Bill Pettit, the executive of District 1 of PennDOT, confirmed to me that, in fact, yes, there would be $1.2 to $1.5 approximately $1 million that could be redirected to a rehabilitation effort, and that it could be a very straightforward process if the recipient of those dollars and the ownership of the viaduct remained in the city. It would be much more complex if it was not owned by the city and would also require PUC approval. As I have indicated in the past, the model throughout the country for this kind of restoration is ownership by the jurisdiction in cooperation with a nonprofit. As Adam Trott has pointed out, our hands are tied to help you raise money until you remove the specter of destruction from the viaduct so that grants and other things can be applied for. I also was a little bit distressed to have the city engineer say to me, Freda, if you really cared, you would work on addressing people running across the Bayfront Connector. That's the real problem. That was one of the goals of the study, was to address that safety problem. Destroying the McBride Viaduct will in no way address that problem. If you spent $700,000 combined of two studies and not address that problem, why are we destroying the McBride Viaduct? In fact, we are going to bring more pedestrians to the Bayfront Connector, tempting them to run across. It's ludicrous. I am the one who caused the September 26, 2016 meeting on site discussing the 12th and Bayfront Connector crossing to happen. The only reason there was any kind of public on-site discussion is because I caused it to happen, because I did not want for this destruction of the viaduct to happen without an opportunity to address the safety of that crossing if it was going to happen anyway. And yes, they are going to increase the size of the standing area before you cross, and they are going to address the sidewalks on the north side of the street, but that does not improve the safety of the crossing. It's an extremely dangerous crossing, and I think the city needs to really take a hard look at whether that's what they want to be doing. And as I said, the Erie CPR, as part of Winds of Change 501c3 is more than willing to participate in an effort to raise funds, but until you take this off the destruction block, we're not able to do it. In 2015, at a city council meeting, the city said that they were going to have a discussion with viaduct supporters. This summer, you mentioned that you would have a study session about the viaduct, and these things have not yet occurred. As Adam Trott mentioned, the PennDOT and the city have referred repeatedly to this extensive examination of the viaduct that they did, leading to an estimate of $6 million. They've never provided that in writing. Please do not destroy the McBride Viaduct.
Freda, send me those addresses by email, okay? I think you did already, but can you do it again? The sidewalks. Okay. Mr. Wagner, can you do it in 2 minutes?
Well, I can.
Can you stick around till after the public hearing?
I think I'm going to. And, I really didn't plan on coming down here. Richard Wagner, 42nd and State.
We got to stop it right now. That's what I'm asking you.
What's that?
We have a public hearing scheduled right now.
Right now?
Yeah, that's what I said.
No, I'll stay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
That way I can give you 5 when you're done.
No, I'll be back.
Are the gentlemen from Hammett here? Yeah. We're now going to have the public hearing portion of the meeting. I think they want us to all sit down in front there, okay? Yeah.
They ask for the screen up.
Yeah, we're going to go down there.
You're going to sit on the front row?
Yeah.
We're going to sit right where it's
Oh, my glasses.
All right, then. Pursuant to provisions of zoning ordinance number 80-2005 and proper legal advertising, the City Council will proceed to hold 2 public hearings, one for the property at 104 East 2nd Street by PMC Hammett for construction of a professional office building located in the waterfront commercial district, and the second hearing will be relative to properly located in the waterfront commercial district for construction of an 8-story hotel and off-street parking lot.
They're out there to watch this presentation. The problem is they can't see. They want everyone to be able to see. So they've started to kind of go out. Otherwise, the presentation would be behind the times they can't see it. They won't ask very many different so they can see.
I can see a good shot here. In focus. Yeah. I'll narrow.
Like I said, the far left, you don't know who the man is, right? No, okay. Absolutely, I have no idea. But I think I'm going to go out there just to watch this.
right. Good morning, everyone. I'm here representing UPMC Hammett for the addition to the hospital. This is called our Patient Care Tower addition, and we'll go through our presentation. So this is the... Thank you. So on the screen, what we have is kind of an aerial view of UPMC Hammett, and the blue kind of block in the center is where the addition will be going. So that is Front Street running into 2nd Street. 2nd Street's running east-west there. Front Street's running north-south. Right now, currently the pro-medical building sits there, and so the first stage of our project will be to demolish that to make way for this. It's really considered an addition to the hospital. And the driving force behind this was the master plan that called for more ICU beds. So the main reason for this addition is ICU beds, but it's also to provide more capacity for growth for Hammett. And so the 2nd and 3rd floor, we have ICU beds, and we have some support in the basement, but the rest is really kind of open for future use. Again, back to kind of the Hammett campus with the fuchsia color being Hammett buildings. This shows where that professional medical building and the garage sit, and both of those are going to be demolished to make way for this building. That's really washed out. That will be better. That's really washed out. I'll be the tripod. Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Being a white. So this is kind of our landscaping plan for the site, and this was a response to early design review comments about integrating, the streetscape with trees on 2nd Street. We have some daylilies fronting our building, but we really don't have much site. We're infilling between McGee and kind of the existing south complex, north complex main entrance. So what we're trying to do is do what we can and continue the streetscape down. This will be a good time to talk about kind of the entry and flow. So the main entrance to this building really is considered the main entrance as it sits now. So there's a valet drop-off, and there will be a connecting corridor into our building. The second entrance is this new drop-off over here on the east portion of the building. But the main entrance, this is considered, it's an addition. It's connecting these existing pieces of the building. So we really want people coming in this way. When you know where you're going, there's probably a higher % chance you'll be dropped off over here. The square footage of the building is about 200,000 square feet, plus or minus. Each floor plate sits at about 25,000 plus or minus, just depending. 7 stories, 1.5 or so below grade. So here is the southeast corner, and on the right-hand side of this picture is kind of that secondary drop-off I was discussing. So that's kind of how that'll set up going down 2nd Street, looking towards Front Street. We wanted to keep consistent with much what Hammett's done. We wanted a building that was going to blend into the campus and kind of respect all the decisions made, while kind of bringing it forward into the future a little bit. Here's just a view a little more straight on from that south side, looking at the landscaping of it, the trees. And then here's just a view looking down Front Street. Now the other side of the building, so on the west and east side, this really kind of butts up to the adjacent buildings. But on the north side, this is kind of the bayfront view, and keeping kind of this consistent linearity as you go across that site was pretty important to us. Just have a very kind of brief schedule. We're looking to take down the Pro building sometime early next year, maybe mid next year, and the tower construction will follow right after that. We wanted to present, so everything we've seen has been presented at design review and planning commission. We just wanted to show kind of a quick look at what the inside looks like. This is the first floor, so this corridor, kind of on the bottom portion of this drawing, is that kind of connector piece I was talking about. So it flows from the west and the main entrance, and then it flows up towards McGee. And then on that side, you can kind of see the entrance there. That is the secondary entrance to that. And then this is kind of our typical floor plate. So this is actually the second floor. The third floor will look very similar to this. This is 32 ICU patient rooms that kind of run around the perimeter of this so that we have exterior light. And then all those support services as they take place within there for those units. Potentially in the future, fourth and fifth floor could have a similar arrangement of some other type of beds, but none of that's been planned for yet. And then this is just back to that southeast view as I wrap up. And thank you.
I know it's been public record before. What is the total cost of the expansion?
111 million. Yeah.
More political question than a design question. Will this be included in your pilot, in the pilot agreement? This is not exempt from that? Or
Yes.
Do you plan to honor that commitment?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
As it appears here, about 5 floors above ground?
Yeah, it's 5.5. We have a variance to go to a 6th floor. The way the grade works, on 2nd Street, we're really 5 floors above. Where it connects to the back is 6. So.
What's your total new employees, and what percentage would those be minority?
We don't know the total new employees yet, Mel. As we develop the beds and put the beds into practice, we'll know the employees as we do that. But UPMC, since UPMC is actually, since Hammett became part of UPMC, we're up about 600 employees overall. If you look at percentage of minority versus white, we are at about 12.2% current employment. We're at about 12.2% minority, which is a little higher than actually the demographics for the county. Mm-hmm.
In relation to employment, construction, demolition components, what are those numbers looking like as far as jobs and, I guess, minority and
diverse. Yeah. Well, we haven't bid the work yet for the demolition. I mean, right now we have our construction manager on board, and we're preparing to do that. But UPMC in general, we have a very strong minority vendor program and a minority vendor vetting program through Pittsburgh. And we always encourage minority participation in our bids, and we do look at that when we're awarding the bids. Even if it's a prime vendor, who's not necessarily a minority vendor that has minority vendor subs participating underneath them. That's certainly encouraged and certainly part of our decision process as we go through. It remains to be seen as far as overall minority participation.
Is there some way of incentivizing front to utilize local work.
Yes.
Minority is one piece, but then there's a local component.
Yes. Yes, and from that standpoint, we'll be using members of the local union halls through the construction folks. So they would obviously pull from local first, and if they can't, they're going to have to augment from other areas. Actually, it's a concern of mine and of Brian's that from an overall construction perspective, there's so much going on right now throughout the state that the cracker plant down south, and they're really pulling a lot of the trades. And it's great thing for Erie with what Erie Insurance is doing, with what we're doing, with what St. Vincent's is doing, and others. There's so much construction activity here as well. It's actually a concern that we're going to be able to get the workers. So, but we will use local wherever practical. I will say from a local minority vendor participation perspective, and this has been a struggle since I've been here, is we don't have a lot of Erie-based minority vendors that do this type of work. When you look at, for example, WCA is now part of UPMC, and WCA in New York. So we're doing a little bit over a $20 million project there, and we have about over 30% minority vendor participation there, and which is fantastic. And obviously the vendors are there. As we look at our bidding, not only do we have our core minority vendors through UPMC, but I think that we can maybe draw a little bit more from, considering that relatively local, hour and so away, try to draw some of those vendors into here. And we've had discussions with large construction companies actually outside of our region as well that are very interested, that are minority owned.
Are there, not to get into this too deep, are there varying degrees of expertise in relation to construction work that maybe there's an individual who isn't a mason or something, but there is some just strong glass up labor that can be done. It doesn't have to have necessarily even, I don't know if it's what language, union or some connectivity to union or local, but just some where there's that grinding, I want to work, I don't necessarily haven't been through the process yet, but I live here, I want to work here. Is there a place for that?
There you go.
Brian Ivorone, Director of Facilities and Construction. So with respect to construction in the hospital, so this is a little different animal. So even with respect to the demolition of the building, doing the demolition on a house, say, for example, is a lot less complicated. Here we've got an 8-story building where we've got existing hospital buildings surrounding that. So the group of people that are qualified to do that is much more limited. You're really looking at more of national, large construction firms. I was spending some time even this week kind of researching what people do that and what are qualified. So our primary concern is the safety of the people in the surrounding buildings and how that building comes down. So that and the union component kind of limits a little bit about who you can draw from. As Ray mentioned, the labor force comes from the local unions, and so you have a branch of the unions for carpentry and for electricians and plumbing, but also the laborers. So the laborers are the ones, that union, those trades are the ones that are doing the cleanup on the site, some of the selective demolition. So we would definitely draw upon that. Even if it's a national vendor, they are going to utilize that workforce that would be local to Erie.
Hold on to that, probably. Huh?
Yeah, you might.
Yeah.
Noise to make more.
Can you see what you need to see for the question?
Can you slide it down?
Slide it down.
Just close it. Either that or slide it over.
trying to get rid of it.
I don't know how to work it.
What's that? That's Kaz also. Kaz gonna tear up something. Get Mike in the back. What are we doing? Oh, the screen?
I think the screen just lifts off.
Mike's right back here.
Okay. Oh, that was real good.
Good accordion.
Thank you. Of course, that light's right in my face.
I don't want to. All right, now it's Kaz. Kaz is on your face. Oh, okay.
That's better.
That's okay. I like the spotlight.
Let there be light.
Curtis.
I got walked by the lights 4 times.
There we go.
I'm used to the spotlight.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, you ready?
We turn the screen off.
Okay, are there any citizens to speak in support of the project? And this is in support of the project.
Yes, Adam Trott, 531 West 6th Street, second floor. Yeah, I think the questions I have actually support the project. And let's face it, I mean, I don't know of anybody in Erie that doesn't want this project, to be honest with you. Hammond's proven to be a great corporate citizen. But I had several questions that will help define the project that I couldn't determine from the presentation. One is the south-facing facade all glass, reflective? And if so, how's that, the glare and bounce of that being mitigated from imposing on the south neighbors?
Yeah, so the south-facing facade is a slightly tinted glass, but it is not a reflective glass. There's some brick on that facade, but it is mostly glass.
And is there also bird control measures from birds running into it? It sounds silly, but it's actually a significant architectural issue with glass buildings.
So the glass will be of a darker tint, so that's kind of the measure there. And additionally, we've taken measures. The large expanse of the glass is flat, so there will be no caps on it, so there will be spider control measures as well.
Thank you. And then the next question, does this project impact traffic or pedestrian flows around that area?
Yes, and we've had this discussion with members of the city. So the intent really is to close off 2nd Street for probably halfway across that block. We need to maintain access to the other Hammond facilities that are on East 2nd Street, but also there's a couple other local businesses there. Health South is there, Kidder Watcher Architects, but so there will be provisions, but mainly that is for constructability of the project and also safety for the people in the area. We just want to maintain a safe work area for the contractors and the people in the surrounding area.
So that's a temporary?
Yes, that's temporary.
Okay.
It'll probably be the duration of the project, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 years.
Okay, well, that's significant knowing it's temporary. Thank you. And then impervious surface, were there any impervious surface issues with stormwater?
Those were all addressed through the design process. I don't know that we're really creating much more of an impervious surface than already exists because there's an existing building there and a parking garage.
Yeah, so the delta is insignificant.
Correct.
Okay. And then does this building have, this is my final one, does this building have particular objectives for energy conservation?
Excuse me. I've been informed that if you have any questions, put them in writing, okay, and we'll get to the gentleman. But this portion of the meeting is for information for the public, and you can either speak in support or speak against it, but we're not here to question them. If you have some questions of the gentleman, I'm sure you can give them their card and they'll ask your questions.
Yeah, I guess my point was...
Yeah, we're not here to have an inquisition, though, okay?
I hear you on that. My intent was that this design firm actually has a great track record for these projects. And I wanted to make sure the public was informed of all the really good aspects that this project brings that kind of get missed in the discussion. And, as a colleague architect, those items are significant to show the public how the profession is being very responsible in developing these projects.
Well, please make your comments, but we're trying not to have these gentlemen.
That was my last one. But,
okay.
But my point was they're all positive. Yeah.
Good morning, and thank you, UPMC Hammett, and I support this project. My name is Jason C. Brundle, and I have two quick things to ask. The first one is Erie's old house, that's 2nd and French, the current Whitaker building. I'd like to know, I know it's going to be safe, I know the demolition is going to be very professional and everything like that. I just want to make sure that that building is not going to be disturbed or not going to be, because it's Erie's oldest building, I'd like to preserve the history. Second thing is that we have a new development right across the bayfront, Harbor Place with Nick Scott Enterprise. Now, with the drawings I've saw with the Harbor Place and your drawings, I think before you build this new fabulous, beautiful, new good thing, possibly help the workers there with putting the parking lot across the bayfront, because the current Harbor Place project has a new parking lot that they want to build in that where the employees park. And I think it'd be beneficial to the employees and the residents in the city of Erie if you help perk that parking garage there and that pedestrian bridge that the Harbor Place wants to, put forth. So I think maybe connect with them as a suggestion to make it look a little bit better and efficient and a little more prettier, for the area. I'm just doing those two quick things. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm John Buchner with the Erie Downtown Partnership here in support of the project by UPMC Hammett. We are extremely pleased that a project of this magnitude is one of the anchor projects that is within the downtown, within the city, and of course the county and our region. It's in this support of the members and the businesses that we serve that we want to express our gratitude to the hospital for their continued investment, not just in the community and support of the citizens, but it's ultimately in support of their clients and those that are in need of medical care, and for them to have the vision to continue to improve as a facility for them to better serve our downtown, our city, our county, and the region as a whole. As mentioned, we are in total support of the project. Thank you.
My name is Freda Tepfer. I live in the city of Erie. I'm Certified Orientation and Mobility Specialist, a member of Presque Isle Audubon Society. And this project does provide some excellent opportunities. Since this street closure will go on for at least 2 years, it's an excellent opportunity to correctly implement notification and accommodation requirements for pedestrians relative to the street closures. By doing that, they can help to create a market and employment and a business in Erie for providing this notification accommodation. There's lots of construction going on. All we need to do is have a person who has a business to provide these amenities, and this is a great opportunity to make sure that the city starts to seriously implement those requirements. Also, it's a great opportunity to take a look at, for the entirety of the area owned by Hammett, given the amount of money they're spending on this redevelopment, is there an opportunity to improve pedestrian access between from the Bayfront to Front Street or First? I'm not sure what street it is, but a sidewalk on the west side of Holland Street. Perhaps that is an opportunity that this excellent project could consider. Thank you. Oh, wait a minute. I did forget. Birds. I would direct you to contact Mary Birdsong, who had a national expert at the last Audubon meeting discussing the issues with bird collision into glass buildings. And there are some modifications that can be built into the glass. the dark tint won't really stop birds from crashing into the building. And second to cats, crashing into buildings is one of the greatest causes of mortality of birds in the urban environment. Thank you.
Are there any other citizens that speak in support of the project?
Good morning, Council. Gary Horton. I stand to support the project. I do echo some of the concerns and questions that were raised here this morning. And I would encourage Council also not to make a decision until after you have your study session on November the 16th on the community benefit agreements. I was born in Hammett Hospital some 66 years ago. I'm a product of displacement off of West 11th Street, redeveloped area. Some of you know that. And I grew up at 2nd and Sassafras. And I think what Gannon and Hammett have done in that area is arguably very much the best thing for the community. But I would also encourage you that a rising tide does not lift all boats, contrary to what some believe. And I see the project here, as well as the next one that you're going to talk about, as an opportunity to provide opportunity or equity, an opportunity for people who live here in the city of Erie. I believe as intelligent and as committed as people in this community are, that we can come up with a plan that genuinely benefits the people that have elected you to represent them and keep them first. I think local hiring opportunities and commitments, some of the questions that were raised about how does this project really, how can it really benefit the local people, not the people in the region, not the people in the county, because they're not here asking you to speak for the county today. They're asking you to speak about the residents of the city of Erie. I think the investment over the years of what the people of Erie have done in water and sewer and roads have been great for the region. But there are some people who have not been able to rise with that, all of that success in growth and development. Community benefit agreements provide an opportunity to do what council can't do in providing equity and opportunity. And so I would only encourage you, as I do support this project, I know what it has done, and I can have a vision of what even more it can do about people who reside here in Erie. We have more than enough cars driving in and out of the highway for jobs that we have in Erie. I think people who live in Erie would appreciate a greater opportunity to benefit from that, whether they be minority or new American, the largest growing population that has helped stabilize Erie's outgrowth. And I believe that this project and the next one represent that kind of opportunity, and I would implore you to encourage the seekers of your support today to look at community benefit agreements as an opportunity to maybe have a rising tide lift all boats. Thank you.
Are there any other citizens that speak in support of the project? Any other citizens that speak in support of the project? One last time, any other citizens that speak in support? Are there any citizens that speak against the project? Any citizens that speak against the project? One last time, any citizens that speak against the project? Hear none. Mr. Puz? We'll now hear from the zoning.
Morning, Council President, and esteemed members of Council. My name's Matthew Puz. I'm the Secretary to the Planning Commission, and I'm here to read the recommendation. The City of Erie Planning Commission at the regular meeting on September 19th, 2017, reviewed an application by UPMC Hammett for a 6-story professional office building located at 104 East 2nd Street, tax parcel ID 1050-127. The property is located in the WC2 Waterfront Commercial 2 District. Since all changes in use are conditional uses in this district, the proposal shall be presented to the governing body for their approval. After reviewing the application, the Planning Commission voted 4-0 with 1 abstention to recommend that Council approve the proposed professional office building as presented. The Commission believes that the professional office building should be granted a building permit on the grounds that 1, all zoning requirements have been addressed, 2, this is an appropriate use for this property, and 3, all landscaping concerns from the Design Review Committee were addressed. The City of Erie Design Review Committee at the regular meeting on September 6, 2017 voted 4-0 with 1 abstention to recommend approval of the design of the professional office building, provided that an updated landscaping plan was submitted to the Planning Commission. Respectfully submitted.
Any questions for Mr. Puz?
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr.
I don't know if this is just more of a semantics kind of a question. Is the term professional office building just a technical term for that structure? It's not an office building. It's a facility for more patients and beds and...
Yes, the term, it's a professional service, which is a permitted use in that district.
Okay, so we don't have anything with maybe a more descriptive or accurate description what that building is?
No,
and what's the process then to do? Is there a process to, again, when it just rang in my ears, professional office building, and this is not a professional office building. Of course, there's going to be professional services, medical services. I mean, there's a totally different space, but doing a totally different thing. Than a traditional professional office building. I just wanted to know if that was just some category that it fit in or we put it in, and if not, and if it is there a way of creating something that's maybe more accurate of a description of what is actually going to be done in that facility? It could look the same on the shell of an outside, but they're not doing professional. I mean, of course, there probably some logistical paperwork stuff, but this is a medical services being provided in this building. So I think we should, I don't know again what that process would be, but I would really be interested in making a category that's more accurate to what we're actually allowing them to potentially build in that space. Okay. That's my concern, Mr. President.
I mean, we would need to amend the zoning ordinance to address a new category.
Well, good thing we're the body that does that, right? So we can do that. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Thank you, Mr. Puz. We'll see you in the second round here shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings to a close this public portion of the hearing, and we'll now go into the new portion of the public hearing, and we'll ask for the representatives from Scott Enterprise to please come forward.
Okay.
I'm going to see if we have...
Okay. Yeah. So the answer is yes.
One day. Oh, hey, can I give you your parking pass?
No.
One parking pass.
Be here anyway. Crazy, silly exercise. Most women are like, they're going to go to whatever, especially if you
Thank you. Okay. All right, once again. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Weber. I'm a planner, architect, and a landscape architect with Weber Murphy Fox. And I have the pleasure today of presenting the first phase of Harbor Place for Scott Enterprises. Today we're talking about the first phase of Harbor Place, which includes the hotel. And I think in order to sort of explain the hotel, what I really like to do is step back and really describe to you the master plan so you get an understanding of the overall vision within that this hotel sits within. So Harbor Place is a 12-acre mixed-use development planned on 3 parcels owned by Scott Enterprises down on the waterfront between State Street and Holland Street. Front Street, existing, currently runs east-west between State and Holland and through the center of this project. Right now, the project is estimated to be about $150 million worth of improvement down along our waterfront. It's going to include over 100,000 square feet of new office space. It's going to include close to 100,000 square feet of new retail space down there, as well as at least 200 new residential units. It's going to include new public space, new plazas, new parks. It's going to work with the Port Authority to enhance the water's edge along the project. It's going to include new parking and new public ways of accessing our waterfront and circulating along our bayfront here. So it's a very exciting project, and part of that, of course, is this first phase. To sort of understand that first phase, hopefully you can see this is a three-dimensional model that shows sort of the massing of what Harbor Place will begin to look like down along that property. The piece that's orange in the center there is what we're talking about here today as part of Phase 1. So, as you can see, Bayfront Parkway is running up to the right. State Street is running over to the left. We have let me see if I can use our mouse to sort of explain how this works. So these two large structures in front would be the parking garages along the Bayfront Highway, and then we would have office and retail that will eventually wrap along Front Street, which continues here in front of the Blasco Library Museum located here. These would be office towers with retail along the first floor. Same thing on the north side of Front Street. We have our first hotel, we have a potential second hotel, and then we have residential space along the water's edge located here and located out here at the end of the Holland Street Pier, along with restaurants and other entertainment venues as well. The green space and paths you can see begin to put together a network of public spaces connected together to provide venues for events and festivals and fairs and all sorts of uses for the waterfront for the public. So, back to what we're talking about today. The first part of this project then is going to be the Hampton Inn & Suites. So, Harbor Place was first announced to the public almost exactly 4 years ago, in 2013, November of 2013. Scott Enterprises did a public press release down at the Library Museum to announce this project. 1 year ago today, Scott Enterprises was awarded the RCAP, or the RACP, which is an economic development grant from the state. They awarded $5 million to put towards this project, which is defined as the hotel. The hotel right now is a 95-room Hampton Inn & Suites. It's just fast forward to our site plan. It's a relatively standard program for the Hampton Inn & Suites with the rooms, and then we also have a rooftop entertainment venue as well in the hotel. As far as the site plan goes, as you can see, the hotel sits, as we showed in the model, sort of towards the center of the site, just north of Front Street. The improvements that are included in Phase 1 would include improving Front Street, so a slight realignment to the existing Front Street, slight regrading of Front Street, and that would help sort of pave the way for the future development that's going to be coming, with minimal disturbance to the operation of the hotel itself. We have a parking lot to the south of the hotel and also south of Front Street, which would serve the parking needs for the hotel itself, as well as any other of the rooftop venues that go along with the hotel. Part of our agreement for this hotel with the height, we were here in 2013 getting a height variance, and part of that height variance is that anything over the 50-foot mark, we had to provide 1 extra foot or 1 foot, equal foot of public open space. And so, as part of this project, we are providing the public open space, as you can see, which is the beginning of the park. This is the beginning of the park to the northeast of the hotel, as well as the pavement that leads us down to what will be the future ice rink and future fountain area that you see in the master plan as well. And that area is not part of this first phase, but we're beginning to sort of build those connections for that future development to happen. As part of the agreement, we need to provide about 30,000 square feet for the amount of area that's over a 50-foot. Part of this first phase is we're actually going to provide about 33,000 square feet of open space and public access around. So, other than that, the hotel is very standard, and I'll just walk you through the site plan. I'm going to crouch so you can see. So we have Front Street running along east-west through the site from Blasco Library Museum over to State Street. The improvements for Front Street would include sidewalks on both sides up to the hotel, would include a large paved drop-off plaza and vestibule for the hotel itself, for guests to come in, park, valet then to take their cars and park them in the surface parking lot to the south. The hotel would have walkways on the east and west side. As part of this park open space, we would also construct the pathways that begin to define that park along the west side of the park and continuing around the north side of the hotel as well. For the hotel itself, it has an outdoor eating area to the southwest of the hotel, which is sort of a spill out from the internal program, which is their breakfast, their standard breakfast service that's in the hotel. They have an outdoor pool deck, which would be private to hotel guests off of the east side of the hotel. And then off the northwest side is another outdoor patio, which services the internal conference room, again, a standard program for the Hampton Inn Suites. To the south of that, again, sidewalks would connect over to the parking lot. Services would be hidden behind enclosures for trash and utilities. The landscape, of course, we follow along the ultimate tree planting that we want to see along Front Street, and then the additional planting that's required for the parking lot itself. Even though this is going to be a temporary parking lot, we envision having the parking garage built within the next few years to go along with this and help support the other functions and development for Harbor Place. We're still providing all of the necessary landscape as if this was a long-term parking lot. Let's go to some of the elevations so you can understand what this hotel begins to look like. Internal program is very standard. Again, we're dealing with Hampton Inn Suites, which is a Hilton product. And Hilton, as a brand or as a flag, as they call it, has certain design guidelines that we need to keep to or respect. And we have certainly pushed them very hard to create a unique hotel down here that really we feel fits within the waterfront district of Erie. So you can see what we're doing is we're using brick masonry along that first floor. That's going to tie into what we're doing in Harbor Place long term, which is those retail spaces that we're creating along Front Street, that first floor, which we want to kind of create that feeling and sort of celebrate the industrial aspect of what the waterfront has been in the history of Erie. It also ties to the brickwork that's being used over at the Blasco Library Museum as well, so it ties into that whole district. Then above that, we go to sort of a standard hotel facade. The sort of the spires, the crowns, the cornices are sort of a typical Hampton Inn & Suites brand. We've actually simplified those to make them a little bit more progressive and match some of the other construction happening along our waterfront, which is I would say a little bit more tasteful than what the Hilton brand would recommend in these cases. So we're definitely putting our beret on and trying to design this unique for Erie, unique for the site that it is, and hopefully begins to set the language for the rest of the Harbor Place development as this continues in the years to come. So the front entry is probably one of the most unique parts of this hotel. Because this hotel is designed to fit within the overall master plan of Harbor Place. The heart of Harbor Place is really that center plaza. It's that center public space, which is currently envisioned as having fountains in the summertime, having an ice rink in the wintertime, being able to hold art festivals and farmers markets, and all sorts of events out there throughout the year. Harbor Place was designed with the buildings located in that public space being created in the center in order to create or enhance sort of a year-round use down at our waterfront. Those of us who know Erie know that our waterfront in the wintertime is desolate, it's cold, it's rainy, it's not a very pleasant place to be. So we're looking at how we can begin to develop this project with these buildings to start creating some spaces that are going to be accessible year-round, used year-round, comfortable year-round in the environment that we know here in Erie. This starts to set up that language. So this is the first piece of this project. You can see we're beginning to create that vestibule, which begins to wrap around that center plaza, starts to add that weather protection, starts to add a little bit of the vibrance to the center of the Harbor Place, in which in the next future phases we'll then be able to create those fountains and public spaces that we see on our rendering, which I will take you back to here. So our goal is to create a very vibrant, useful, open project in Harbor Place, and we think it's going to be a wonderful asset for Erie and really help grow Erie's economy, help bring Erie into the future, and be a wonderful improvement for our city. Okay. You guys have any questions while we're here? Absolutely. Absolutely. You're talking about the Phase 1 site plan?
Yeah. There's no water's edge development.
There is no water's edge development really as part of Harbor Place. Technically, Scott Enterprises owns up to property lands that's about 30 feet away from the water's edge. The Port Authority then owns pretty much the whole perimeter of the water, up to about 30 feet, maybe a little bit more in some areas, a little less in other areas. So when we talk about our master plan, long-term vision, Scots have a great relationship with the Port Authority, and we're going to work with them to continue to enhance that water's edge, to allow all the public access. We're talking about some parks out there. We're talking about better seating and railings and stuff for people to get out there and be able to use that in a safe manner, exactly the way they are using now. But it technically isn't our property, isn't Scott Enterprises' property. It's owned by the Port Authority. So we did have an estimate of how many jobs this was creating. Unfortunately, I don't have that information in front of me. So because of this project was awarded the money through the state of the RCAP, that has with it, through that application and approval process, we had to prove along the way that we were creating a number of jobs, not just through construction, but long-term employment down here. That this did not just plug into our first phase, but also the future phases, which would add to more jobs. This also, we had to prove the tax dollars that this was going to create as well. I think in 2013, when we looked at the whole project, we were a little over $3 million of new tax dollars that we generated with the construction of this project. This being a smaller portion of just phase 1, obviously it's not going to create that. Along with the RCAP, we also have to do prevailing wage. So the construction will all be done through prevailing wage. We also have a women and minorities requirement that goes along with that. So the contractors and vendors that will be used have a percentage of women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. We have to meet that in order to get that money from the state. And that will be reviewed throughout the project by the state. So it's not just one thing we say and something else happens. The state's there every step of the way to make sure that that's happening. And the city, which is acting as a sponsor for this project for that RCAP grant, will also be there to make sure that this project every step of the way is meeting those requirements.
Is there a time frame for the overall completion of the master plan? I know that's a big question to answer.
You know, it is a big question to answer. Certainly we'd love to see this go quicker. If you had a project, similar project to this in a different market, a lot more would be constructed much faster and without the need of public funds. Erie is a very unique market. So I think, with that, I think we're lucky to be here today, and I think we're here today. A lot of that is because of the state stepping up and supporting this project. And so as that grows and we watch market conditions, Scott Enterprises are very smart about how they develop, watching those and making sure that that they're taking the right amount of risk in creating a project that's going to be sustainable long term.
So it's more market driven.
Absolutely.
Versus, hey, we got the space, we got the money, we're going to do it.
That's right.
Be involved as the market lends to it and it's successful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny because, Weber Murphy Fox, we're celebrating our 50th year here in Erie community. And I was reading through, 40 years ago, we did the Perry's Landing project, which included Niagara Pier and the Liberty Plaza and the Perry's Landing Yacht Club down there as well. And reading some of those old newsprints from back then, 40 years ago, and the things that were being said, saying, hey, this is going to change the face of Erie. In the next 10 years, we won't recognize anymore. Well, here we are 40 years later. And, ask those guys what they would have thought 40 years ago. They'd probably be surprised that we're still where we are today. We've seen some great things, but I think we could have a ways to go. And I think we'll get there. But, again, ask me again in 40 years. Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah.
I guess this is more a question for the Scotts, but in terms of the hotel, would it be possible to, once it's built, to advertise for those jobs or hold a job fair for the neighbors of that area? There's a lot of immigrants to that area, a lot of people with only a high school diploma who might benefit from, who are looking for work that might fit the hotel industry. Also, people who are graduating from Mercer's Northeast culinary program, for the hotel. If we could somehow incorporate a job fair for that community, that neighborhood, that might be a good thing moving forward once it's complete.
Yeah, I would just say absolutely. We would definitely want to do that. We are in the process of hiring for a restaurant we're opening IHOP. We'll hire 120 people, and we are hopefully going to be ready for our opening in 2 weeks. But we will hold as many job fairs as possible because we need those people. We're depending on them to operate this. And I think the hotel will employ around 45, and then the entertainment venue on the top would be another 25 to 30. So we're talking about 60 people working in the first phase at least, not construction. And currently, we employ as a company over 20% minorities as it is. So, and we will depend on people that live in that area to work in the hotel.
Thank you. One more question. In terms of the entertainment venue, is that going to have waterfront views or is that more street city views?
Okay, for me to talk about that, guys? Let me show you what's currently planned, if I can get to it. So this is the rooftop entertainment venue that's currently planned, and you'll see this in your packets as well. So on the 8th floor of the hotel, on the north side facing the water, there is an internal entertainment area, whether it's a restaurant or a lounge. We're still working out some of the details for exactly what that is and working with Hilton on what they will allow. That will then have a large rooftop deck off to the northwest of it. So you'll have a large space that overlooks not just that inner harbor, but you'll be able to see the tower, the bay, Presque Isle, the lake, sunsets, and beyond. So beautiful place to sit, entertain, beautiful place to have all sorts of events. So, yeah, anyone getting married in a year and a half here, they may want to start calling the Scotts now. So.
Even though it's in the future, there was a bridge to Hampton.
Correct.
Does Hammond support the project? Especially maybe possible use of the hotel?
I think one of the things that's been, I'm not going to speak for Hammond, but let me just, over these last 4 years, we have had 30, close to 40 different public hearings, public meetings, meeting with stakeholders, meeting with Erie Insurance, Hammett, Gannon, tons of people, tons of organizations getting their support behind this. I think Hammond is a big player in the future of this project. They're a big player in the future of Erie in general. And I think this project can certainly cater to their needs long-term and short-term. So we certainly are hoping that there will be that continue to build that relationship as this project develops. So. Well, I think we had a gentleman speaking earlier about the bridge and the parking, and that certainly is something, and you follow the newspapers, you know that there's a parking study out there now, and Hammond is part of that, along with the Scots, along with the county, and the parking authority. So I think that's out there right now, and we're looking at that. We know we need it. The parking study itself is a difficult process because if you walk down there today, it's hard to stand in an empty field and look around and say, we need parking. But you go down there at the Great Ships Festival, that's a whole different story, right? So this project, when it comes to the parking, just this first phase and the future phases, we're going to displace over 300 existing parking spaces that are down there along this empty lot now. So you not only have those 350 parking spaces that are going to be eliminated, but then you also have the need of these additional parking spaces that are generated by this new development. We really are hoping to encourage people to really support those parking garages down there because they're going to be needed long term.
In the long term, will this turn into a gated community?
That is not our goal. And we've had that conversation with stakeholders. There have been some talks about whether or not portions of this project would be gated when it gets into that residential product. Our current thinking right now is that no. I think what we would do is we would have to develop the housing in such a way, certainly the housing that's here, part of this initial phase, as you can see just to the left there of the current hotel. This phase of townhomes certainly would not be gated. There would be private areas within that, certainly, but it's not a gated community. We certainly wouldn't be throwing people out. And then there would be an amenity package that we're looking at, a potential amenity package with the housing that would happen then there at the end of Holland Street Pier. So that development again would have some areas of it that would be private for the use of the residents there, and certainly some elements of security. But again, the area around it, the plazas, the access to the water, access to the parks, the walkways, all of that would be public. The big part of this project is integrating these developers program with the community's needs, and this project is only successful if the community is down here using this, and this is a conduit for our downtown to get to its waterfront and to access that waterfront. It does us no good to create an obstacle here between the community and its waterfront.
Once again, what is the time frame for start completion for phase one?
So right now, phase one, this hotel, we're looking at breaking ground on April 1st of this coming April 1st, so 2018. And the construction process is going to be anywhere from 12 to 18 months is what we're anticipating. Okay.
Squeeze his fingers and use that handle.
You want me to take it?
No, it's in your way, not mine.
I'm okay with it.
Okay, we'll let the professionals handle that.
Okay, now we're going to open up the portion for those that are in favor of the project to speak. I'll remind you, please, for the sake of the stenographer, give your name and address, and either support or be against the project, but you're not here to question the developers. Okay, so having said that, is there any citizen to speak in support of the project?
Once again, I would like
Give your name and address, please.
Jason C. Brundle, 4131 McClellan Avenue, Erie, PA, 16510. And once again, I'd like to thank Nick Scott Enterprises for thinking about downtown Erie, and I support this project. And like I said about the pedestrian bridge that you're going to be placing there, I strongly advocate that you guys work with UPMC, because a lot of people that I know work at UPMC, and I think it'll benefit the UPMC, your employees, the city, and to make that pedestrian bridge a part of Phase 1, and to work with UPMC, because if you knock it out of the ballpark, trust me, it will be beneficial for that. And then also, is the entertainment complex that's going to be on the top floor, is that going to be a restaurant that's going to be 24/7, like any old restaurant that you own, or is it just going to be for private functions?
You just said don't ask questions.
It'll be a bistro, bar, entertainment. It'll be versatile and have many uses, but the main thing is it'll provide a beautiful view. And these rooftop venues are very popular in large cities. And I probably visited 20 of them. And so we're going to bring the best that we can to Erie.
And last thing is that because Erie is such a historical place that we have...
Mr. Brendel, just real quick, taking a point of management of the meeting, Mr. President had to step out. We're not doing the question, so if you have a specific question, as was mentioned by President previously, you can get that to them, or you can just kind of ask it in a rhetorical manner, and then they can give a response later.
Okay, last thing about preserving Erie, labeling rooms and stuff like that, preserving Erie's name, good brand. There you go.
Good morning. I'm John Buchner with the Erie Downtown Partnership at 140 East 5th Street. Once again, we stand here as an organization on behalf of the many members that we serve within the downtown district, the property owners, that we are in support of this project. And we thank the investors for their development in the downtown so that they can start to connect the assets that we have to better utilize the amenities that we have, and to literally have the vision to make this more of the destination. I also want to comment that I assure council that both of these projects that we heard from today, the design teams and management teams have been in the meetings with PennDOT as we were studying the Bayfront Access Study and how these projects impact the upcoming and demands of safely transporting people to and fro each of these developments. So that both of these organizations have been at the table and those needs have been considered. Again, we are in support of the project and congratulate them on their advancement. Thank you.
Gary Horton, 2046 East 19th Street. Again, I rise to support this project cautiously and with concern. I believe that Erie development should benefit us all. We should grow together, and I see this as an opportunity to do that. While neither team that came here to present today reflect the diversity in the community, to appreciate the real impact of the questions that some of you raised, the fact that a rising tide does not lift all boats is prevalent in my mind when I look at the development that has taken place in Erie over the last 20 or 30 years. We've come to council before. We've gone to the planning meetings and the zoning board meetings over these two projects. And at both places, they told us not here, not here, not there. It was council. And so as I look here at council, you're the people who represent the voice of the people who live in Erie. And so we've gone there and we've raised the issue of community benefit agreements. And they haven't been received that was the place to address it. There's planned development in downtown Erie, and the Bayfront will create over 6,000 construction jobs. There will be thousands of new permanent jobs in the hotel and healthcare and property maintenance and other fields. There will be hundreds of new residential units. It's time Erie taxpayers get a fair return on their investment in these projects. Reducing economic disparity needs to be a part of these development plans. With community benefit agreements, this can happen. Erie is Zoning variances are a tool used by government to incentivize new development. It is a common local government to require community benefits for guaranteeing new jobs, hiring local residents, and providing affordable housing in return for a variance. Scott Enterprises, for example, received a variance on the Bayfront Land Zone for a maximum of 50 feet in height. The height limitations were originally enacted to preserve waterfront views. Granting the variance immediately increased the value of the land. In return for this benefit, Scott Enterprises agreed to preserve some public land as a part of the development. Erie Insurance was recently granted a variance for 12 acres it owns downtown. This follows previous variances granted Erie for a parking ramp and career school. The upzone will enable them to mix business and residential uses and to put multiple buildings on one site. While there is no specific plan for the property, the zoning variance dramatically increases the value of the property. The city has not proposed any public benefit in return. Scott Enterprises, Erie Insurance, and other developers granted variances received immediate appreciation on the value of their property when it is upzoned. Unless there is a commitment to specific community benefits, there is no guaranteed return for local residents. So communities across the country have looked at circumstances similar to Erie: tax breaks, zoning variances, public funded infrastructure, and asked a simple question. As a taxpayer, where is the return on my investment? The answer isn't to stop development. Without development, there can be no return. Increasingly, residents are requesting, asserting, encouraging, pleading for community benefits in exchange for the incentives that you give them. I would encourage you to encourage these people who are seeking your support on their behalf, that they seek and develop or agree to community benefit agreements with the people of Erie for your support. Thank you.
Adam Trott, 531 West 6th Street, second floor. I'm here to speak in support of this project. I've got to switch hats now. I'm here representing Bike Erie. And this project is the first project that I know of that actually developed a bicycle plan for their site. They approached Bike Erie. They gave us their plan. They said, look it over. Let us know if you like it. We liked it so much we gave them a letter of support for their application for the RCAP funding. And as we try to move the city forward into the 21st century and try to brand Erie as an innovative and creative community, I just want to commend the project team for doing that and setting a precedent that, yes, these big-scale projects can look at those types of aspects of their infrastructure to make Erie a better community. So thank you, and Bike Erie supports this project.
Are there any other citizens to speak in support of the project? Any other citizens to speak in support of the project? One last time. Any other citizens to speak in support of the project? Are there any citizens to speak against the project? Are you speaking against or for? Okay.
My name's Freda Tepfer. I live at 1738 West 23rd Street in Erie. I'm a certified orientation and mobility specialist. And I am very grateful for the contribution that Scott makes to various causes in the community. I'm a seasonal subscriber to the Symphony, so I appreciate your continued support there. I worked for 12 years for the U.S. Forest Service and participated in dozens of interdisciplinary teams. I participated as a soil scientist, specifically focused on soil and watershed management. On many of the teams, we had a landscape architect. And the function of the landscape architect on these interdisciplinary teams was to help analyze and preserve the visual management of the timber harvest that the Forest Service engaged in. And we looked at the viewscape. I live down the valley, and we looked at the viewscape and how these clear cuts would appear way down the valley. My point in bringing that up is I am continually concerned with the physical and visual access of the waterfront. The city has gone beyond what they are required in providing height variances for both parking and an 8-story hotel. I have not heard that Scott has looked at the entirety of their project and provided us a visual picture like the landscape architects that I worked with in an area before we even had GIS available. But what is the impact of this 60-foot high garage and 8-story hotel and the entirety of the project as viewed from Front Street, from the Bayfront Parkway, and from further back in the city? How is our view of the waterfront going to be deteriorated by these projects? This is our jewel. Our Bayfront is our jewel. People don't come here to look at parking garages and 8-story hotels. Perhaps there is a way to do this without destroying that visual view. And I have yet to see that the entire viewscape has been analyzed from the variety of places that the view will be impeded by this construction. Again, this is an opportunity, if you do grant this project, to ensure the very best effort to ensure adequate notification and accommodation of all pedestrians during the construction process. And again, supporting a local entrepreneur who can help to provide the materials needed. This project should ensure that there are adequate crossings of Front Street with actual stops of vehicles all along the way. Right now, there's only one actual stop of vehicles, and that's in front of the library, even though there are places that direct people to cross. Currently, it's possible to walk from the west side of the Blasco building using sidewalks over to State Street on your way to Dobbins Landing, and I'm not sure whether that access is being preserved. The city currently doesn't have the process to record a development plan, and I think that the city should ensure that they have the correct ordinances and regulations that allow the site plan to be recorded. But most of all, you need to analyze the visual impact of this project and the entirety of Scott's projects here. And I also think it's disingenuous of the person who spoke to say Scott's property is 30 feet from the water, so we're not impacting the water. Building all of those amenities that close to the water does certainly have an impact on the experience of the person who wants to walk along the waterfront. Thank you.
Are there any other citizens to speak against the project? Any other citizens to speak against the project? One last time. Are there any citizens to speak against the project? Hearing no more comment, Mr. Puz?
Morning, Council President.
Hello once again.
Esteemed members of Council, my name is Matthew Puz, and I am the Secretary to the Planning Commission. I'm here to read the Planning Commission's recommendation. The City of Erie Planning Commission, at their regular meeting on September 19, 2017, reviewed an application by Weber Murphy Fox for an 8-story hotel located at tax parcel ID 1046-101 and a temporary off-street parking lot located at tax parcel ID 1046-136. The properties are located in the WC Waterfront Commercial District. Since all changes in use are conditional uses in this district, the proposals shall be presented to the governing body for their approval. After reviewing the application, the Planning Commission voted 4-0 with one abstention to recommend that Council approve the hotel and temporary off-street parking lot as presented. The Commission believes that the hotel and off-street parking lot should be granted building permits on the grounds that 1, all zoning requirements have been addressed, 2, this is an appropriate use for this property, and 3, all landscaping concerns from the Design Review Committee were addressed. The City of Erie Design Review Committee at the regular meeting on September 6, 2017 voted 4-0 with one abstention to recommend approval of the design of the hotel and off-street parking lot, provided that an updated landscaping plan was submitted to the Planning Commission for the off-street parking lot. Respectfully submitted.
Any questions from council members to Mr. Puz?
That's a question.
Yes, Mr. Jones.
In this process thus far, there was a variance that was granted, right?
Correct.
And that was a height variance?
Yes, and on July 8th, 2014.
Right. So with that said, in granting that variance, and I know multiple years ago now, the entire, that group, they look at view obstruction issues in relation to granting that variance or not. I mean, there's a whole process. It's not just like they granted a variance because we like them. There's a process. They vote on that. And all of those aesthetic and visual impairment, that's not the right phrase. I apologize. Visual obstruction issues to the bayfront and to the water, all those things are part of that conversation, correct?
Correct. When the Zoning Hearing Board met on July 8th, 2014, there were comments from the public about obstruction of the bayfront.
The view and the height.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
And so in receiving that variance, there were specific community benefits, not to play on words, but community benefits in relation to public access, having to match. And again, I don't know what the formula was, but for every so many feet or whatever it was, there was more access that had to be granted to the community for public accessibility and public access. So there was a formula that was put in place, and it was not just, okay, you get the variance. In relation to receiving this variance, these are some other areas that you have to do or expand for public access. And I think I heard in the presentation that they actually went above a little bit what was required. So I'm bringing this up in relation to, maybe in response to a question or statement that was mentioned by a citizen, is that those things were taken into consideration previously, and we can continue to have those conversations, but they were not done in a vacuum, and those variances weren't given without those considerations. So just wanted to have that on record as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
The condition that the Zoning Hearing Board placed on the approval of the height variance is that for every habitable square footage of space created above the maximum height, an additional square footage of public space must be dedicated to the public.
Okay, thank you for that clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Puz.
Thank you.
And that'll adjourn the public hearing session of the meeting, and we'll shortly reconvene the public speaking portion. I want to thank Hammett PNC Hospital and Hammett, and also Scott Enterprises for their confidence and faith in the Erie area, and we look forward to hopefully more better things to come. Thank you. And we will vote on this at a later date. And Mr. Wagner, if you'd like to step up. We are now going to have citizens to be heard once again. Thank you for being patient.
Oh, no, I'm glad I was here, actually, to listen to the presentation. My name's Richard Wagner. I live at 42nd and State. This comment is about the marijuana and I think maybe the penalties might be a little too strict, but this isn't Woodstock. Drug, sex, and alcohol should not be discussed up here in a fashion that it's being discussed. I think the laws probably are a little strict, and if you're carrying a little bit for yourself, okay. And I grew up in 1965, so I understand. My generation would have probably loved to have what's going on. But, we need to have some controls. I saw county government just turned $1 million in revitalization money from gaming into $500,000 by adding unproductive layers to its distribution. Given that Mr. Woods and that group to distribute and make it a county, Erie is in dire straits for money. And we have 9,000 houses that need work. I'm sure our 9,000 is more than all the blighted properties that are in Erie County, I would think. So we need to look at that. Here's something else I just discovered on Facebook, actually. Federal court in southern Ohio found rental inspection programs to be unconstitutional. I'm sure Erie's program will follow. It has always had unanswered problems. So, I dig into that because I've heard where maybe some people here in this building would like to be the inspectors and take that program over. You might have to rewrite the whole program based on what I read, and it seemed pretty authentic. Perry Square. What do we expect? Erie has lured people to a concrete jungle using Section 8 housing and locating agencies that provide services to the less fortunate in downtown. And then expect these residents to stay inside, out of sight, out of mind. If the only green space provided is Perry Square, where you can enjoy fresh air and sunshine, that's their right, and frankly, a need. Fresh air and sunshine, enjoy. Drinking and congregating in our park has to be controlled. It's everyone's green space. It has to remain a safe, comfortable environment for all. And next week at this time, we'll figure out who's going to lead our city forward for the next 4 years. And I hope it takes off like a rocket ship. And I think the foundation is there based on what I heard today, Erie Insurance and other projects. And what we need to do is just get out of the way. Let these people spend their own money and get on with it. And I think Erie will be a lot better for it. So you got your hands full, guys. Thank you.
Morning, Council.
Morning, Mr. McDonald.
My name is McDonald, and my property's 19th and Reed. I have an issue with a few issues with the way the candidates, we can't speak to them. I don't know who came up with that brainstorm. We should be able to ask them questions. Those people asking questions, they don't know what we want to ask them. We could speak for ourselves. Are we that dumb that we can't speak for ourselves? We don't need nobody to speak for us. You all supposed to be speaking. Who came up with that? That was a wrong way to go. We can't ask our own questions. Are we that dumb that we can't ask our own questions? It's just, you're taking I'm not saying you all, I don't know who's doing it, but I'm laying it out there for y'all. We don't have no freedom of speech. You're taking that away from us. We should be able to ask the people that want to lead us, what is your agenda? We wants to know that. You got people scared of y'all, but I'm not. I ain't scared of nothing. Kill me. I can't die but one time. And I mean that. We got to sit back and listen to somebody else answering questions for us. Now, I mean for all of us, the black and the white. There should be somebody out there that intelligent enough to put a question to the candidates. Y'all know that was wrong. That's wrong. You're just taking everything from us. We're paying for the freight. Why can't we ask the questions? I want to see y'all change that. I really do. I want to see that change. That don't make sense. Does it make sense to you? You don't want nobody speaking for you. You want to speak for yourself. If I'm loud, you have to forgive me because I don't hear too good. People with a, hearing deficiency, they'd be a little loud. Y'all have to forgive me. But what I'm telling you is straight up. We don't need nobody to get up to go to a meeting. You don't know what we want to ask those people. We're paying for it. Why can't we ask them? Why has all of this, the freedom of speech been did away with? That don't make sense to me. Y'all need to change that. Go back to so the people that's paying the taxes, and I am a taxpayer. I ain't paid them yet, but I'm going to pay them. But don't I lose my property? I don't know. Anyway, I want y'all to change that. I want y'all to think about it. That's food for thought. You know that's wrong. That's wrong. We don't need nobody to get up nowhere and speak for us. My mouth is big enough to speak for me. And I'm sure there's a lot more like me. They just won't come down here and tell you. But like I said, I'm not afraid of nobody. Ain't nothing you can do to me. Like I say, I can't die but one time. And it ain't going to be long because I'm old. But I thank God for the time that He's given me here. And a lot of you don't even know who God is. I do. He's that man up there sitting high looking low. Y'all better learn who He is because He got a lot to forgive you for. But you got to ask Him. But I say to you again, I like to see that change. People getting up talking for you. We don't need nobody to talk for us. We can talk for ourselves. And I could speak for all of them because they seem to be a bunch of cowards. They won't come down here and look at y'all and talk to you and tell you what they don't like and what they like. But I'll tell you what I like and don't like. You might not like me for it, but I don't care. I'm not down here for you to like me. I'm down here to tell you that what you're doing ain't right. And I want you to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Any other citizens to be heard?
Michael Keys, 3612 Reed Street. First, I'd like to say this is the first of these public meetings that I've gone to, and I'd like to echo Mr. McDonald's sentiment. I understand that there are rules, but when you call something a public meeting and the public doesn't have a chance to voice their opinion, it's really not a public meeting. And so what I suggest, if it's outside of council's rules, they should have a public meeting where the public can address questions and concerns to the people who want variances and who want to put up large-scale projects in our city. Second of all, I'm here as an advocate for the Viaduct. And I was with you in caucus, and I do believe safety is a very big concern, but I also believe that, the bridge serves a purpose. And I actually echo what Mr. Jones said, that, it may not be cutting off the areas, but if you are a person who has to walk and does not have a car, between the Bayfront Connector and Downing Street is nearly a mile. You'll have to go all the way around if you're a pedestrian or if you walk or even if you bike if the viaduct is torn down. And I don't know if you know it or not, but there's no way to even get on the Bayfront Connector from the west side of the connector at this point. So we have kids jumping 3 lanes of traffic to get onto the sidewalk so that they can continue their route either north to the north. And what I see is this is an opportunity that we have where we can make things better. I see nothing to no advantage to anyone to tear down the viaduct. What I see is when we tear down the viaduct that we're spending $2.4 million, that's going to trigger a $3.8 million fix. And I think if this $7.5 million probably could be reconfigured to keep the viaduct and to use it at a limited purpose. Somebody made a point that what if they had it for 1 lane going north and still used it for biking and pedestrian on the other side? And that would take away the need for the access road that they're spending millions of dollars to cut into the Bayfront Connector so people can go north. And so I just think that that's something that maybe wasn't thought about in the study, and that the scope of the study was defective because it didn't go through the entire process, including using it as a limited use. Thank you.
Any other citizens to be heard?
Hello, I'm Martha Wachuku, West 8th Street, Building 320. I have a question about the processing because I'm still learning about city government, and I don't expect you to answer it now. So when I hear public hearing, I expect for people to be allowed to ask questions of the people presenting. So at what space or time in the processing of the decision making are people allowed to communicate these type of questions? I understand that afterwards people could go and talk to the people who are presenting and ask them personal questions, but I benefited from some of the questions being asked publicly and hearing the answers rather than having to wait later and see them written up somewhere. So that's all. I just had a question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Allison Kaminsky, 411 Madison Avenue. I noticed today and throughout kind of recent times that a common theme in many of the meetings and public hearings, what have you, is communication. The people are constantly kind of saying they feel that communication is lacking or there's issues with communication. You see that in the viaduct, or whether it's this UPMC or Scott presentations, or really the comp plan, and I think the comp plan has gotten the most attention with regard to communication. I'll say, in fact, I'm a little bit hesitant and almost nervous to raise my concerns about communication due to the fact I was directly called a troll by a city council person when I raised the very same point several months ago, and that communication was not an issue and that communication happening was appropriate. Me, a constituent, raising a concern, called that. I ask that you please take a look and take action on open, honest communication engaging the citizens. Whether it's just perception or not, it needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Any other citizens to be heard? Any other citizens to be heard? Any other citizens to be heard? Hearing none. Rose?
Ordinances for final passage. Council File Number 15605, Official Ordinance Number 28/2017. An ordinance appropriating the sum of $60,000 from unappropriated and unanticipated revenue and providing for the expenditure thereof in the Capital Improvement Fund for use of emergency replacement of a roof at Firehouse 13. By Mrs. Arrington, second by Mr. Brennan, that Council File Ordinance Bill Number 15605, and now known as Official File Ordinance Number 28/2017, be finally passed by the City Council. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mursky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Kwiatkowski. City Council passed Official File Ordinance Number 28/2017 finally by yea 7, nay 0. Council File 15606, Official Ordinance Number 29/2017, an ordinance amending Ordinance Number 26/1958, the Traffic Code of the City of Erie, by the installation of a stop sign at one intersection, Peach Street and West 3rd Street. By Mr. Mursky, seconded by Mr. Winarski, the Council File Ordinance Bill Number 15606, and now known as Official File Ordinance Number 29/2017, be finally passed by the City Council. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mursky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Kwiatkowski. City Council passed Official File Ordinance Number 29/2017 finally by yea 7, nay 0.
Thank you.
New business.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr.
I'd like to make a motion to move the balance of the agenda, please.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Witherspoon. Are there any separations?
I would like to separate number 3.
Under new business?
Yes.
Okay. Separate number 3 under new business. Any other separations? Voting on the balance then?
All right, moving the balance of the agenda. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mursky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Kwiatkowski. By Mr. Mursky, seconded by Mr. Jones, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that the Mayor and City Controller are hereby authorized to execute the Federal Aid Bridge Project reimbursement between the City of Erie and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Transportation for the final design and for the utilities and for the right-of-way and for the construction of the City of Erie McBride Viaduct East Avenue Bridge. Comment?
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Mursky.
As the maker of the motion, I'd like to speak first. This is merely a reimbursement for costs that are already incurred, and this is for the city to be reimbursed 80% federal and 15% state for costs that have already been incurred. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yes, this is an ongoing issue with the viaduct. For me, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and I do agree with one thing that the citizens are saying is that we should have a public hearing on this because we got a lot of he say, she say. And when you have both sides in the same room at the same time, I think we can get our questions that we have answered. So I really want to push for a public hearing on this.
Any other comments from any member of council?
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr.
If in fact we have a public hearing, will there be dialogue as indicated by some of the speakers? If there is not going to be dialogue, then there is no need for a public hearing, because all they're going to do is hear what we say or Bill Pettit say or our engineering department say. I believe they want to be in the dialogue. Now, I know for a fact once you open that door, it's beyond dialogue. It's he said, she said, becomes an argument, and then you have to wrap the gavel and probably clear the whole house out anyway. So I agree with Councilwoman Arrington in having a dialogue, but we cannot have a public hearing and everybody speaking, 20 people saying the same thing, and at the end, the results will probably be the same. It's a no-win thing, but public hearing, if you have everybody talking, nothing's going to be resolved.
Mr. President.
Yes.
I think people are confusing, and they're interspersing public hearing versus a community meeting. And a public hearing is an official act, and there's a formula to it. It's, you hear the presentation, people speak in favor, people speak against. We hear the recommendation of the Planning Commission. That's a public hearing. It's much more formal. A community meeting is an informal dialogue, and any council person can conduct a community meeting if they wish. I mean, and if it's the will of council, we could all show up. But the two are not interchangeable words. It's a community meeting is different than a public hearing, and I think we're confusing the two.
I would agree with you, Mr. Mirsky. When this issue's been going on for, I'm guessing, over a decade. And I myself was a strong advocate for keeping the bridge. And I remember there were numerous public hearings, but there are also numerous, what you called, community meetings. I attended one at, I think it was the On Deck or something, the last one I remember going to, where, we had open dialogue and people questioned. So, it's not like this hasn't been hashed. And I understand there's going to be disagreement out there, but if we have another formal public hearing, I would agree with you and Mr. Witherspoon that, it's not going to be what they want. If you want a public meeting, like Bob said, any member of council can call one, but, as far as a public meeting, we've met all the legal obligations of it. So I think, having said that, there's no dialogue. I'm sorry. I'm not abrogating the First Amendment. This is a public meeting. And, you're free to call me or any member of council. I'll discuss it with you. Stay after the meeting. I'll stay here as long as you want. But, having said that, does any other member have a comment? Okay.
Mr. President, I can't stay today as long as we want. We have a dedication at 12 o'clock at 3rd and Cherry for Ron Steele that I'm getting ready to depart to. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Witherspoon. Rose?
All right, roll call. Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones, Mr. Mirsky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Kwiatkowski. This resolution will adopt 7-0. And that'll take us to committee reports, Mr. President.
May I go first because I have to go back to school?
Pardon?
I have to go back to Collegiate Academy. So
I
apologize. Go first. I just have a few things I want to report. Back to school, right? In terms of the decriminalization of marijuana, there was a speaker that spoke, and I think there's a misconception that decriminalizing means there's no penalty, and that's not the case. What we're doing is examining lessening the penalty for small amounts that are otherwise law-abiding citizens. So it's not a free-for-all. Like, I don't want people to get the misconception that it's a free-for-all and anyone can do whatever they want. That's not the case. And as we move forward, we'll probably have a community meeting to address that issue, because I know people have a lot to say. I did attend the decriminalization of marijuana meeting, or rather presentation at the Jefferson Society. It was very well attended, and there was a lot of information presented. I thank Representative Gainey from Allegheny County for coming up, who is championing the same legislation at the state level that we're examining here. Also, it was interesting. There was a doctor from UPMC Hammett, or rather the UPMC health system, speaking about the decriminalization of marijuana and the need to approach it the way we approached cigarette smoking, and addressing it with the youth through education. And we've been very effective at decreasing people smoking cigarettes. And in the same way, he said that 80% of the women in prison are for drug use. And so we're breaking up families. And he said that's actually less healthier for children than trying to keep families together. And finally, I just wanted to let people know about the process. Marty asked when can you get your voice heard, and so there's a process. We have design review committee meetings, zoning hearing meetings, planning commission meetings that are oftentimes no one attends. And those are the times when you're allowed to get your input in. And if you can't make it to the meeting, you can email your comments in, and they'll put them on the record, and they'll take them into consideration. So there's at least 3 spots to get public input, and they're all advertised, and they're all public meetings, and they're in the newspaper. And we, to the point of communication, what I'd like to see, and I don't know if the administration can help us with this, if we can put them on our website, right on the front page, just that list of meetings, so that people can go as a one-stop shop to say, all right, this meeting's this week, this meeting's next week. Fred, thank you, because I know you're a strong advocate for that. So, and I agree with you on that. That if we put those right there, it's an easy way because most people don't get the paper anymore. They go on Go Erie, or they get it through electronic means versus traditional means. So if we could do that as well, I think that would help people in terms of that. And other than that, I have no report, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brennan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. With the discussion about the viaduct, I agree with a lot of things that were said here about the hearing versus the community discussion, but I would gladly participate in a community discussion if someone were to have one, whether we have it here or somewhere else. But there has been that discussion back and forth. Oh, what does this cost? What does this cost? Let's look at this safety issue here. So I would gladly participate in that and try to lend whatever I could bring to the table. Knowing that area of the city well, knowing some issues with the infrastructure. So I'd gladly take part of that. And if anyone wants to discuss that, we could discuss it at the meeting to maybe set that up or attend a meeting. But again, we would have to have the people at the table, if PennDOT would participate, to answer questions, to get into a little more detail and just have that discussion, pull out the maps and just see what we can get done. But definitely safety is the issue. You have 2 intersections that are both dangerous, the East 12th and East Avenue, and also East 12th and the Bayfront Parkway. So, again, there's blind spots that was discussed earlier. There's all kinds of issues with these roadways. And again, there can be tons of improvements. I again attended the open house the other day, and it wasn't as descriptive as it could have been, but I know there's planned infrastructure improvements for landscaping, other issues that's going to be addressed. So I know we could, maybe this discussion could be looking at some of those maybe finer details. And then again, we talked about the cost also. We hear the $6 million to rehab, and then there's $3 million to rehab. So I guess I'm not sure where to go there. I know that the bridge engineers are telling us one number, so that's kind of what I've been basing everything I've been thinking of so far and basing going forward. Another thing I wanted to think about, I know it's been discussed by other individuals, is looking at the entire area, maybe looking at East Avenue more, because it's such a unique area of the city. As part of Erie Refocused, again, we need to have these neighborhood planning meetings where we could talk about how to improve the area, improve the streetscaping, support the businesses and all the nearby residents. So, again, part of Erie Refocused should be having these upcoming neighborhood discussions. As far as other things going on, I attended the Blasco Library Idea Lab grand opening. The grand opening talked about the collaborative spaces that are included. It includes a maker space, which has 3D printers, sewing machines, vinyl cutters, all kinds of stuff, a media lab, and community classrooms. And I know really this initiative is going to help Erie to look at training and look at their entrepreneurs, and they're going to be providing job and career resources. So I think it's a definite benefit for our city. In regard to the public hearings, I'm not going to say too much about the patient care tower because I work for the design firm, but for the Hampton Inn Hotel, again, a spectacular project. It is well thought out design. Have some discussions on what was looked at as far as views and those type of things. But this project will again create jobs, as was discussed. It's going to be a regional amenity. With the community benefit agreements, I know we have the discussion coming up. The work session, we're going to talk about that. But I think the last time on council we had a discussion that we currently don't have a structure in place. So hopefully at this meeting we could talk about getting that structure in place, getting those processes in places, so that we could develop this, so that when projects come up, we could have that kind of discussion on how it could benefit the city. But hearing some of the discussions from both of the groups, there are things that they are doing that can be enhanced to bring more jobs, and especially local jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Mr. Winarski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very brief as usual. UPMC and Scott Enterprises, I just want to thank them for believing in Erie and wanting to invest in Erie. We're not talking, of course, any investment in Erie, whether it be on a smaller level, but this is a big level here with between the two of them, $260 million. So, along with job creation, it's just one of those great things to see the city wanting to expand and grow. And it's too bad that it has to go through such a process where it gets implemented. But for the benefit of the city and the citizens, sometimes we have to go through that red tape. But it's good to see that they've taken a very big step here today, and we'll be voting on it, I believe, at our next meeting. So that ball will be get rolling there. Other committee reports, I do want to ask the administration if they could please check with engineering. I know they're doing that road construction, East 38th Street, still presently. I don't think they have all the lights up. But the traffic light at Mercyhurst and the one at St. Luke's School that right for the exit to the parking lot, those lights got changed where they're staying red for an empty parking for the 38th Street for quite a while, and it doesn't matter what time of day. So if they could just check to see if, and that may be for a reason now that at the end of the construction they'll have them corrected, but there's definitely been an issue there. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winarski. Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be as long as usual. No, I'm just kidding. As Jimmy would say. In relation to the decriminalization of marijuana, I am absolutely in support of looking at what that looks like and how to deal with that. It's much more, to me, that's a justice issue in a significant way. And so, again, not eliminating or legalizing per se. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about taking some of the harsh, more extreme penalties out of the hands of the justice system in relation to that. So I think it's worthy of looking at. and kind of staggering stats that Mr. Leopold gave in relation to like Pennsylvania being having the fourth highest incarceration rate in the nation, and those things. Pretty interesting to me, since we're so rural of a state, right? Be interested in some disproportionality questions around that too. In relation to community benefit agreements, I'm a supporter. Like anything, we have to find a structure, because we can't afford to do things haphazardly as a body and as an administration, as a group of elected officials or a collective of electeds. Some things we love to just go do it, and let's do it right now, but the process doesn't allow us to do that. For us, the best way is to have conduits. Why Little Italy is moving and booming and doing and has some of the resources they have is because they have an organization that is the conduit through which public funding can go. And so I think that whether it be, again, community benefit agreements, I agree with, but we have to have a system and a conduit for which we can do something, and it becomes integral part of what we do, if that is, again, the will and the desire of this, I guess, whoever the incoming administration is and future councils, et cetera, because this is some of our, we have 3 meetings after this. So there are other people that will be transitioning here very soon to kind of carry the mantle and of moving these things forward from elected office. The other thing, or another thing, in relation to the viaduct, respectfully, this has been going on in a very significant and public way since about 2010. So nothing's being rushed. This has been a process that's been going on for several years. Now, again, and I'll use the term respectfully, very intentionally, because I can be very sound flip, but I don't ever mean to be. Just because certain people have come to the conversation later doesn't mean that the conversation is rushed. And so I've had the privilege and responsibility, as many others on this council, to have been involved since 2010. Being in those public meetings, being in those public hearings, having these conversations, whether it's the Erie Refocus Plan. I was literally almost had to play literally had to play mediator from public individuals in the community at East High who were arguing over what they did and didn't want, and it was just not the right venue for that kind of. So we've had extreme levels of communication. And I guess it's kind of overarching point around communication as well. Because we are a legislative body, we have systems and processes through which we have to do and fulfill our responsibilities. And they don't fit the norm of what the average citizen maybe is used to or maybe is interested in participating in. But with that said, it is our process. And there are, again, many opportunities for side conversation, private conversation, or just open general dialogue and conversation. But when we're in certain systems, there are ways that things have to happen, even if we disagree with it. There's times when I want to dialogue back and forth, but the rules of council are such that we try to minimize that. And there are reasons for that, because if you were to go back and look at some of the very ridiculous conversations and meetings that we've had in this building and in this room over the last 15 years, it was, to the point of some people saying, I'll take you outside. And so we have to limit some of that because these things and these issues are passionate, and we have to have a professional decorum and structure in this building. In relation to also the viaduct, someone, I don't remember who it was, but they mentioned about funding being an issue, because that's a big thing for me. So if you want to preserve it, then let's allow nonprofit or community members to structure, organize, plan, and facilitate the finances to maintain it, all those insurance, et cetera. And someone mentioned that, well, we can't do that because the city doesn't support it. In a city, and we have to have a jurisdictional body to kind of be in support of, or to be in charge of, or to be provide oversight. If it is not in the city's plan to move forward, in particular, to be that jurisdictional body or municipal body, the Erie County is a municipal body city is a part of the county. If you want to just kind of broaden that conversation, maybe there's a conversation that should be had on the county level. If there's willingness to do that and a sincere looking for options and opportunities to kind of move a different route. Again, I've been a supporter of the bridge in a lot of different ways. And I'll finally end with this, is that we have to be careful, because we do have a lot of conversation and dialogue in a lot of areas, that we don't confuse information as well. We're talking about the bridge, divide up, north and south. East Avenue. But a lot of the conversation and argument around safety has nothing to do with those young people coming over north and south the bridge. It's actually east and west on the bayfront. So we could take the bridge down or leave it. That doesn't keep the young man safe who got hit coming from the west side of the bayfront. So for me, it is paramount whether it is a bridge, viaduct, father, sister, whoever's bridge. The issue is safety around that area, whether it is a bridge or not. So that's what I'm pushing. The bridge is going to be what it is, respectfully. Like I said, I got a few more meetings. I'll still stay involved after that in the next year. But the issue is safety. And a lot of the most dangerous situations that we're referring to are not bridge related. They're 12th Street, East Avenue, and Bayfront connector related. Young people going from east to west. Not trying to get to the viaduct or across. It's Bayfront, East Avenue, and 12th Street. And those things we can fix and make more safe with or without a bridge. So, and then finally, I'm sorry. I know I'm way over. What is this? The longest 5 minutes ever. Thank you, Rose. I appreciate it. In relation to zoning, gave me Mel's time. In relation to professional office building, I think I would like to look at the language in the zoning because that is absolutely an inappropriate description of what we're looking to pass and move forward in relation to Hammett. They are not a professional office building. They are a professional building that's going to provide medical services, and I think there's an honest difference in conversation and use in relation to that. So that's my a report for today. And I am squeezing out, Mr. President, again, to be a part of that 12 o'clock street renaming for Mr. Steele. Thank you.
Mrs. Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I agree with you, Dave, with everything you said about the viaduct, and I am open to having I'm more of a private meeting with maybe 3 individuals from the group and then with PennDOT and some of the other people, so we don't have that back and forth, because there are too many unanswered questions. And I think in a smaller setting, we can get the answers that we need to come up with the right decision for our community. So I'm all for that. And other than that, I have nothing else to say.
If you'd like to, chair that, I'd be pleased to give it to you. Yeah, thank you. Finally, I'm going to keep this brief because I'm keeping it between our other business yet. It would be easy to look down at the waterfront and, discuss whether we should have high rises there or not. But the fact is, council is always faced with the biggest task, which is how do we develop the city? How do we develop the tax base? And unfortunately, in an urban city, which we live in, this is not a bedroom community, this is a city. And big cities have big buildings. And somewhere the big buildings are going to go. And I think over the years they've done a great job of, restricting that growth. I've been to some towns where like Chicago, you might have to drive 15 miles to really see the waterfront well. In Erie, we're talking about an area roughly between Holland and Sassafras. And that's pretty much been defined as the urban core, and we have the waterfront district set up for a reason. And I think, to prevent development down there, we're not Mill Creek. We don't have I-90 and Peach Street there. You've seen businesses leave Erie. Why do they go up there? Because that's the new urban core. Our urban core is our downtown and our waterfront. And we're going to have to do things over the years, with the public in mind, and I think we've tried that with public access, meeting with Mr. Kissel and his group and others to try to balance how do we get more taxes and more business to come into the city and more residents. And a waterfront is attractive in a waterfront community. And I just hope that people understand that. And we do have a process. I know everybody's unhappy how those things go, but it has been a long process on a lot of these things. And I relish what Mr. Mirsky said, and I hope the administration does this, that we make it clear to citizens the procedure where they can openly debate. And I've been here at zoning hearings where there was real chance to debate and nobody was here. They'll come out if they know it affects their neighborhood, but there is a process, and unfortunately sometimes the process is that this is not the point of debate. There is a time for debate. And any councilman, and I get calls at as early as 4:30 in the morning. You can check my phone log. I'm willing to talk to anybody. The marijuana issue. As a young man who grew up way back in the 60s and who served with many men in the military who were chastised for the use of marijuana to the extreme that many of them couldn't get good jobs, I think we do need to look at what effect, while we're not advocating total, abandonment of laws, I think sometimes we overreact many times and we punish people well beyond what is necessary. I think we need to look at that. That's a good argument that, it's like football players. You watch them on a weekend and they get shot up with every kind of cane known to mankind, xylocaine, milocaine, whatever. I don't even know the names. And then they prosecute these same people because, on Sunday, in the process of their own home, they're relieving their pain. And, society has evolved. And I think we have to control it, but I think we need to look at, does the punishment fit the crime? And I think that's what we need to look at. And I think I'm open to discussing that. The community benefits agreement that's been hashed, I am a supporter of that, and we will get that conversation going. And finally, in about 1 week, Veterans Day is coming. Please take time to honor those veterans and take time to take in a parade. I will be marching in it. I will not be walking. I will be marching with my fellow Vietnam and Vietnam era veterans. And please come, take in the services at the hospital. And remember, your right to talk here today and your right to do what you do in this community was guaranteed by a lot of men and women who have done the things that are nobody else wants to do. So that's it for my 2 cents. Mrs. Stankiewicz.
I don't have a report yet on the pension funds, but there's a meeting next week, actually 2 weeks, and I'll be able to present you with the quarter of how they performed.
Okay.
Other than that, that's all I have.
And thank the committee for their hard work and yours too. Mrs. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report from the administration. I'm happy to get information on the website if it comes through the office. Of course, we want the public to know when meetings are scheduled so they can attend. So we're happy to work in that regard. And I'll also work with the traffic engineer to find out what's going on with those traffic signals. I'm not sure if there's might be PennDOT, but
yeah, it may
regardless.
Be, and they may be doing it just because
yes,
you go there at 11 o'clock at night, there's nothing going on, and you're sitting there for 3 minutes looking at an empty parking lot.
It's a real work in progress.
Thank you.
All right.
No comment? Okay.
No report.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay.
City Council adjourns at 11:50. Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Jones left at 11:42, Mr. Mursky, Mr. Winarski, Mr. Witherspoon left at 11:30.